And we are back on the 0 Hour. Joining us now are two people I think very, very highly of. If I were to give you their full backgrounds, it would take our whole segment, so we won't do that. They are summarized on the front page of their new book as scholars, policy advisors, and political activists. And I think that's as good a way to describe these two great folks as any. Eric Kingson and Nancy J. Altman are co-directors of Social Security Works, our sponsor, and they are the authors of a new book entitled Social Security Works, Why Social Security Isn't Going Broke and How Expanding It Will Help Us All. Eric and Nancy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we're glad to be here, and you have two people on the line who are great fans of yours, Richard.
Well, that's delightful to hear, and it's very much mutual. And I guess let's start out by this, with this. Why now? Why did you think now was the time to write a book? I was amazed, I have to tell both of you on a personal level to realize that in reading just the introduction that Social Security Works has been in existence since 2010. We're going on 5 years of this struggle, this political battle over Social Security, a program that was created in the 1930s. Why was now the right time to come out with this book, in your opinion? Let's start with you, Eric, and then Nancy.
Well, Social Security works for the American public, and it's been under attack for many years. And until recently, the discussion has been, how much should we cut it? The book is intended, and I think it does, make the case that not only should we not cut this system, but this system which works, which is efficient, which is the American people's pension, is in need of expansion, and that we can afford to do that.
Well, and Nancy, so Eric is making the point, and we've certainly discussed that on this show and elsewhere, that the program is in solid financial shape, despite the scare talk that we hear as recently as this week in Washington. So, but why? That's the solvency of the program itself. What about for society in general? Why expand it? Why do its users need more from it?
Social Security is a solution. It's always been a solution. And as we describe in the book, there are a number of challenges facing the nation. One is a looming retirement income crisis that will hit today's workers, but even today's seniors are one shock away from being in poverty. So we've got people who are just making it by. We have rising inequality. It's as a result of governmental policies. We've got the most unequal society I think we've ever had. And we have, as people age, we have a squeeze on middle-class families. Social Security is a solution to all that, and expanding it is the way to make a dent in some of these very serious problems. So it is, and the American people are with us on this. It's the elites in Washington that need to be educated.
So, in effect, we have this mechanism that's been working for 75 years and working very effectively. We have a new dimension to the fiscal crisis that seniors and working people face or will face. And so part of the answer is it needs to be expanded because it's in place, it's ready to do the job, and we need it to do that job, I guess. Now, Eric... So please, Nancy, go ahead.
I would even go one step further and say that it's not just that it's in place and it's stood the test of time, but it is the best instrument to do that job. It is the most efficient. It is the most fair. It is the most secure. So it is the right way to go.
So if you have a car in the driveway and you need to get somewhere, why let Congress make everybody ride bicycles? I guess.
Exactly.
I guess I would add, it's absolutely nuts to be talking about cutting Social Security. We're the richest nation in the world. We have a pension system that protects our children. If a parent dies, it protects people who are working. It protects people when we retire. And it does work, and it's absolutely nuts to be talking about pulling it apart, which is exactly what the discussion has been for many years. This is the American people's pension, and we strongly believe that the force of logic and data and also morality are on the side of expanding it.
We're talking with Eric Kingson and Nancy J. Altman, the co-directors of Social Security Works and the authors of a new book entitled Social Security Works. Well, okay, let's have a little fun or take a little chance for a second. I'm going to diverge from what I was planning to talk about because your comment, Eric, that it's absolutely nuts gets me to a question I know individually, collectively, many of us have puzzled over or contemplated, which is, given the fact that it is nuts to be thinking about cutting Social Security now. Eric, you're a sociologist and professor of sociology, among other accomplishments. Nancy, you're an attorney and a policymaker who knows the workings of Washington extremely well, which to me is a great subject for sociological study. And I still struggle after all these years involved in this issue myself. I still struggle to understand. I get the motivations of self-interested millionaires and billionaires and corporations who don't want to pay more in tax, so they encourage the cutting of Social Security and so on, so that they might not be asked to pay more in a payroll tax or whatever. But deep down inside, I still struggle with this deeply embedded set of values within the Beltway that is so at odds with what the American people need and want, that says we should cut this. Everybody kind of nods their heads sagely and and they're in these nicely paneled rooms and says, oh yes, of course we should. It's almost assumed when it's a terrible idea economically and the public doesn't want it. How did that happen? I mean, Nancy, you have one perspective as an insider. Eric, you have another as a not only as an insider, but as a student of human behavior, collective human behavior. But I guess starting with Nancy, how did we get to this place where that's the conventional wisdom?
Well, we elaborate this quite much in our new book, and that is that there has been a 3-decade-long campaign literally funded by billionaires to undermine confidence in Social Security as a way of eventually cutting it. The people who want to cut Social Security, as you say, it's Wall Street, it's a fringe group of ideologues. President Eisenhower even called them a tiny splinter group. And so there's that, but they're backed by huge amounts of money. And the American people have their confidence has been undermined, but they recognize the incredible importance of Social Security. Unfortunately, our policy elites are disconnected from them, and they've bought the billionaires' line that the program isn't sustainable. And as we describe in our book in great detail, and as Eric just said, we are the richest nation in the world. Our benefits are not high by international standards. We can afford to expand Social Security, and we should.
I just say, not only have they bought the billionaires' line that this program doesn't work or whatever, that it needs to be cut, they've also bought the billionaires' campaign contributions. We're dealing with a remarkably dysfunctional political campaign funding system that promotes this. We're also dealing with a myopia among some elites, which is that this system is not just about maintaining income for older people or for children, all of which is extremely important, but it's also about something that holds us all together as a society. We risk pulling our society apart. Those who don't like government like to make the case that this system is not working. We've seen government for the last 15 years or so, we've seen this constant assault on the idea of government as a vehicle that helps people. The argument is they can't do it. Well, in fact, Social Security has done it very, very well for 80 years now, and there's every reason to think it'll continue to do that for 80 years longer. If you want to shrink the federal government, if you want to move to a Rand Paul type of everyone on their own kind of economics, then you oppose Social Security.
So, this gets to a point that I know, Eric, in your writings you've addressed in the past, and Nancy, you've certainly spoken about, which is the idea that Social Security is both and I don't mean to, I'm going to be careful not to diminish its practical value, but it's both an enormously practical and important program, but in a sense isn't what you're saying. In effect, it's also a symbol of our willingness as a society to care for one another, to recognize our ability to help one another, and to become stronger by working together in this way. Isn't it, in a sense, representative? Isn't it almost a litmus test when we have the political elites telling us that this is something that ought to be dismantled or cut in order to protect, whether it's tax breaks or anything else?
Who would you like to take that?
Oh,
one?
good point. Well, how about you first, Nancy, since you asked that very sage question?
Social Security represents basic American values, and you've enumerated some of them. It's this idea that we're not just red states and blue states, but we're the United States. We're all together. We care about our families, but we also have individual responsibility. We are prudent people. We work hard. We believe in reward for hard work. All of those and many other values are embodied in this program. And in fact, Franklin Roosevelt said this was not new values in this program. It was a return to traditional values. And I'm afraid that, as Eric has said, the Wall Street money and the campaign contributions have blinded too many elites. Although I've got to say, policymakers understand how popular this program is, so they don't attack it frontally, but they do stealth things by trying to convince everyone it's in crisis and needs to be cut.
Yes, I noticed that this year, for example, we had Republicans who didn't say anything negative about Social Security. In 2013, when the president included the chain CPI benefit cut, it took them all of 15 minutes for one of their House leaders to go out and say this was a shocking assault on American seniors. And yet the thing they did before they even put away their, their pictures of their family on their desk or water the fern in their office was they tried to cut disability benefits. And so, yes, it's true. This is not a frontal assault. This is kind of a lateral assault on this very popular program. So I guess we're going to take a very brief break now. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the two things. One, the hostility, how it is expressed, the antagonistic attitude toward this program. But number two, meaning Social Security, not this radio program. And number two, a little bit more, perhaps with Eric and Nancy, about binding us together and what that means for us as a society. So let's take a little break. We've got Nancy J. Altman and Eric Kingson, co-authors of Social Security Works, Why Social Security Isn't Going Broke and How Expanding It Will Help Us All. We will be right back after this break. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. This is Richard RJ Eskow. We are back on the Zero Hour talking with Nancy J. Altman and Eric Kingson about their new book, Social Security Works, Why Social Security Is Not Going Broke and How Expanding It Will Help Us All. And Nancy and Eric, before we went to the break, we were beginning to talk a little bit about the way that Social Security binds the generations and different segments of society together. Your book has a very compelling section where you talk about the different people, the different segments of society for whom Social Security works, for young and middle-aged families, for children, for people of color, for veterans, for same-sex couples, for, in other words, what I read this and I think, the big picture here is e pluribus unum, out of many one, that here is a program that most people contribute to and that benefits people at different parts of the world. What would you say is the likelihood that people can be made to recognize, or that they already do, let's say based on polling, and we'll start with Eric, based on polling, that people recognize that this is a program they want supported, they want defended, and most of all that they want expanded?
Good question. And look, every poll that we've seen, whether done by conservatives, liberals, virtually every responsible poll shows that The American people strongly support this across political group, across demographic groups. Union households and Tea Party households do not want to see Social Security cut, and they favor an expansion. The part of this, and I think you started by saying, Richard, this is about the lives of individuals. This touches every individual, every home in a variety of ways. And that seems to be what's forgotten in the discussion, but it's not forgotten outside of Washington. Inside Washington, these quick solutions of raise retirement age, I can work until I'm 75 because I have a political position or I have a corporation I run, and other people can too. Well, it doesn't work that way for most people. And there's a myopia. What we're talking about in terms of disability benefits, the average benefit is a little less than $1,100 a month. The Republicans are now going at disability and setting the people with disabilities up to possibly face a 20% cut in benefits. This is a political game. It's a continuing attack on everybody's Social Security, and it's irresponsible, and it lacks understanding of the danger to the public good. So I think we are all in it together. I think Americans fundamentally support the system. As Nancy says, they've lost confidence. There's been an attack. But part of what we've tried to do in the book is set things right. Firstly, this whole notion of it going broke, silly. There's an ongoing source of income into Social Security. It's based on the payroll. It's based on payroll contributions by working Americans. As long as we have a workforce, we have an ongoing set of resources going into the system. Of course, we adjust it over time. Fundamentally, though, this is the core system. It was General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, by the way, who used the word nuts. He said, as Nancy said, there's a few kooks out there who want to cut Social Security and other programs. They are very few, and they are nuts. So I think some of this is to get it back into humor. We're looking at a system today where American workers have lost good pension protection. The 401k system has not provided widespread protection for Americans. We've lost home equity. We've seen our health care costs go up. The one thing that stands strong and works well is Social Security. So why talk about cutting it? We ought to be talking about expanding. The first thing to do to deal with this retirement crisis that we're facing is to expand protections. We can afford it. We just have to shift that. And we also have to have some humor because it's really quite absurd to have millionaires and billionaires and politically cosseted people lecturing the American people and saying, we've got to tighten your belt. At the same time, they're doing all these tax giveaways to Wall Street.
And, before we go to you, Nancy, I just have to add to that. We're talking with Nancy Altman and Eric Kingson about their book, Social Security Works. I just have to add to that, groups like Fix the Debt, which are primarily funded by Wall Street, bailed out banks, and defense contractors who get rich at the public teat, to use Alan Simpson's word, or to politely clean up Alan Simpson's language, bugs me. It just bugs me. But yes, you're right. Humor is the right approach. And Nancy, let's pivot to the positive if we can for a second. And now having that sort of humorous break of the absurdity of it all, what can we do when we talk about expanding Social Security rather than cutting it? What are we really saying? What would that look like, and how would it affect and my daily life or any working person's daily life?
Well, it means a lot of things, and again, we go through this in great detail in the book. But expand means to increase, so it means increasing benefits across the board. That we keep saying it's time for Americans to have a raise, and it is. And we should be raising the minimum wage. We should be raising every normal wages, and we should also. And this is a form of deferred wages, deferred compensation. So it's time for a raise. In addition, Social Security is a very flexible system that works very well. So, for example, there used to be benefits for students for children who continued on to university or to vocational school after they'd lost a parent or had a parent disabled. We want to restore those. But beyond that, We should have children's allowances. We have when someone has a child, there's a additional expense. We should have paid sick leave. We should have maternity and paternity leave. All of those can be done through Social Security.
Just to add that, just on the paternity benefit resources, income protection, we are the only industrial nation that does not have some form of paid leave for people at the point of birth of a child. Again, we can afford it, and that's good family policy, and we ought to be talking about it as family policy.
You know, it's fascinating because for all the talk of American exceptionalism, our politicians seem shy or hostile to the idea of talking about the fact that we are, in fact, a wealthy nation, number one. And number two, I suppose it's because of the distribution of wealth that's being encouraged. But number two, for all our talk about family values, it seems that a lot of politicians overlook the opportunity to strengthen American families that comes with providing this kind of income security. Is that a fair statement, Eric?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, that was easy.
But to add to that, it's a family program, and we should think about Social Security as a family program. It is the nation's largest children's program, and 1 out of 3 benefits are paid for disability and survivors.
Yeah, and to go back to the crazy theme again, or the nuts theme, it's nuts to be talking about talking about seniors taking advantage of children, or people with disability taking advantage of seniors, or playing off the interests of, or the arguments that men do worse than women, or women do worse than men. This is a system for all people, and the ones who want to pull it apart, they like to create those wedges. Fact is, we really are, this exemplifies more than anything else that we're one nation, we are in this together, and we can do things. We have a responsibility to make contributions to protect ourselves and protect our families and our neighbors, and that this notion of caring for ourselves and others is a part of what government does.
Yeah, you know, I have to say, we're talking with Nancy Altman and Eric Kingson about their book, Social Security, where I have to say that one of the things I love about the book and about the work that you two do is the emphasis on the fact that this is a program about values. This is about who we are as a society. I've gained a lot and learned a lot from both of you as a result of that. And I would also say, in reading your book, I thought I knew it all about the crazy rhetoric that's been deployed against Social Security, but even I had missed some of these Alan Simpson quotes about the old people driving the Lexus from their gated community to the grocery store so that they can take their senior citizen discount on cornflakes or whatever. It is to laugh, but also to weep a little bit, isn't it? That people have been subjected to this for so long. And I guess parenthetically, I don't want to give we've talked a lot about what the Republicans are doing, but I don't want to give the Democrats a free pass either. No. We've had some heroes on that side fighting to expand Social Security, and Bernie Sanders, who is an independent, but I don't know about you guys. I've been a little disappointed to see how many Democrats have been willing to go along.
Well, I'll take it directly. I've been very disappointed in our president. Both Nancy and I worked hard to help him be elected. He's a good man, but he appointed Alan Simpson and gave him to be co-chair of this bipartisan commission, gave him a big megaphone, and this is a guy whose language is insulting to people, diminishing, and in fact, who's a hypocrite because he talks about people being on the public dole. This guy's been on the public dole his whole life, only he gets much more money than Americans. So the administration has not done a favor to the American people when it comes to Social Security. Hopefully that's changing.
Yes, to provide a more optimistic view, we do have more and more people. We now have 8 bills that have been introduced in the last Congress to expand Social Security. I'm hoping for more. We have really Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Sherrod Brown and the Congressional Caucus in the House and many elected leaders who do understand the value of this, and I'm hoping they can educate their colleagues and bring them along. I believe in education. I think there is going to be a fight going on in the 2016 election over the heart and soul of the Democratic Party, and we will see if the Democrats return to their values of valuing working and middle class people and providing fighting for the economic security of all of America's families.
Well said. And we're about to go to a break. Eric, I know you had some time constraints. So if you have to leave, we certainly understand. We thank you. Any closing thoughts?
Just that you and Nancy will continue and have a great discussion. And thank you very much for setting up this opportunity for us to share thoughts on Social Security. I guess one thing we can do, just to add one more thing, which is take a look at our website, socialsecurityworks.org, and other organizations that are fighting to preserve and expand the system. It's very important for the voices of Americans to come in and tell their members that now is the time to expand Social Security. The more the public comes in on that, the more likely will be that we will leave a better system for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
Well, Eric Kingson, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for everything you do. And after this break, Nancy Altman and I will do a brief wrap-up on this discussion. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. And we are back on the Zero Hour talking about I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we are talking about the new book, Social Security Works! Why Social Security is not going broke and how expanding it will help us all. We've been talking with Nancy J. Altman and Eric Kingson, the co-authors. Professor Kingson had to leave us. Nancy Altman is still with us. So Nancy, you were mentioning before we went to the break, you were turning the conversation to the positive, for which I thank you. And I guess you were saying there have been multiple bills, all introduced on the Democratic side, or if we consider independent Bernie Sanders on the Democratic as well, to expand Social Security. What do you see? How can people, let's start out with this, what should people be looking for in terms of the kind of political courage and representation it's going to take to see this program expanded? What kind of arguments should people be looking for, and how can they spot a champion in Washington?
Well, one is to listen closely to the language. The politicians don't like to be pinned down, and they understand the incredible popularity and success of Social Security. So you never hear a politician these days say, "Oh, this is a stupid program, we should get rid of it." Instead, they say, "We want to save it. We want to save it." Using the words, "We want to save Social Security," watch out, because Social Security does not need saving; it's a solution. Now, on the other hand, if you hear a politician say, "I want to expand Social Security, I refuse to cut Social Security," they're being specific. They're letting you know that they're on the side of American working people.
Now, one of the things I've spotted, there's a Republican set of strategies, I think, for concealing one's position. I do have to say, I think there's also a Democratic set. And the Republican is, well, we're going to save Social Security by making it fiscally viable. Yep. And I think that's part of what you're referring to. But I do hear Democrats, when they're on the firing line, I'm thinking of Bill Clinton saying, well, Paul Krugman's right and Alan Simpson is right, which makes no sense to me, or whatever it is. But mostly what I hear on the Democratic side, if someone's not willing to commit to defending Social Security, is, I'm against privatizing it. Now, we're all against privatizing it. It's a terrible idea. That's what the Republicans tried in 2005. They got burned for it. But to me, am I being too cynical? If I ask a Democrat to tell me that where she or he stands on Social Security and will they fight to expand it, and the answer is, I don't like privatization, aren't they kind of ducking the question?
Oh, they are more than kind of ducking the question. They are totally ducking the question. It's easy to say what you're against. And as a parenthetical, they say they're against privatization, but many of them support what I call backdoor privatizing. If you cut Social Security and add private accounts, which a lot of them talk about, that is privatizing. But even more than that, if you cut Social Security and so benefits are inadequate as they are, people have to take their money somewhere, and where else can they take it but the private sector? So it seems to me cutting Social Security is privatizing retirement. But beyond that, it's important to get them to pin Democrats down to what they are for, not just what they're against. They're happy to say they're against privatizing and other things. The other point on this is that another strategy that the Republicans employ, along with we want to save it, but it's like the old Vietnam, save the village to destroy it. That is by destroying it. That's their concept of saving. But beyond that, they have a very much, and I find this really reprehensible, a divide and conquer strategy. They often talk about, these poor young people, Social Security is these greedy geezers are standing in the way of the educating young people. Well, it's interesting. When I was young, I heard those arguments. Now I guess I'm one of the greedy geezers, and only because I've just gotten older. It's a divide and conquer. The other piece is dividing disabled from elderly. That somehow the disabled are stealing from the old people. That we saw a tactic just yesterday in Congress with this new rule.
And isn't it, in fact, the case that neither the disabled nor the elderly are the problem? We have we have a very solvent program. We have a program that's easily fundable for the next 75 years which is infinity in Washington economic terms. And multiple proposals for doing it. Isn't it really that we only have a minute or so left, but isn't it really that they just don't want to do it, and that it's up to the American people to let them know this is what the public wants?
In magic, it's called misdirection. It says,
right.
Oh, look over there, while really the problem is wealth inequality. We have had this upward redistribution of wealth. If the wealthy paid their fair share, we could expand benefits, as we discuss in our book.
Right. And the last thing I'll say about greedy geezers is that everybody using that argument about how greedy the old people are is making that argument to millennials who, A, will become old themselves someday, God willing, and B, are the ones who would be most hurt by all of this. And
in fact, the thing that's really reprehensible about that charge is that a lot of seniors have the wisdom and are protecting the program, not because they think their benefits will be cut. In fact, politicians love to tell them their benefits won't be cut, but because they understand their children and grandchildren will need these benefits more than they do, and they're really doing a public service by protecting this program.
And we're going to have to leave it there, but I encourage everyone listening to go to socialsecurityworks.org and to read the book Social Security Works, Why Social Security Isn't Going Broke and How Expanding It Will Help Us All. Nancy J. Altman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And we will be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.